The antiseptic hush of the private hospital room hummed around Ariel like a secret trying not to be overheard. White walls, filtered light, the steady beep of machines, a quiet lullaby of sterility. Bandages circled her head like a crown, of gauze wrapping tight over her eyes, sealing her from the world. Or so it appeared. She lay still on the hospital bed, her long limbs arranged carefully beneath the crisp sheets. Her face was untouched, still striking. Regal even, but her expression was serene in a way that hinted at calculation, not peace. A woman accustomed to data, to metrics, to outcomes. A woman who'd built an empire in tech by knowing when to listen more than speak. Dr. Mallory had just finished explaining the prognosis: temporary blindness, swelling near the optic nerve, the result of a hard fall down the marble stairs of her home. No brain damage, they said. No skull fracture, just time and rest, and eventually her sight would return. Everyone believed the fall was an accident. Everyone except her. At her side, Darren stood, tailored and tan, the glow of his phone screen lighting the shadows under his eyes. 30 minutes ago, when they wheeled her in from the ambulance, he'd looked shaken. Now he scrolled with his thumb, detached, as if she were just another push notification in a chaotic day. "You'll stay with me, right?" she asked, her voice soft, cautious. The question curled between them like mist. He didn't look up, just squeezed her hand, a polite, almost robotic gesture, and nodded. Of course. Her lips curled slightly, a ghost of a smile, but her face otherwise remained still. Behind the gauze, her eyes were open, alert. Watching, it had taken days to perfect the lie, the silent test. She had memorized the subtle tilt of the nurse's clipboard when checking her vitals, traced each shadow that moved across her room. The act of blindness gave her power. Everyone talked more freely when they thought you couldn't see them. She waited. Minutes passed. A nurse walked in, adjusted her for. Darren shifted by the window, still on his phone, back turned. He hadn't asked if she was hungry, hadn't touched her face. He'd posted a photo of the skyline from the hospital's executive floor to his story, with no mention of her. As if her trauma was an inconvenience, dressed up in white linen and expensive silence. Then she heard it, a whisper, low and careful, from across the room. He thought she was asleep. He thought she couldn't possibly see the way his jaw tightened. As he leaned toward the window, pressing his phone close to his mouth. "She won't see anything," he murmured. "She's blind now. We can move forward." The words settled on her chest like ice, cold and precise. Ariel didn't flinch. She simply lay there, blind to the world, watching. Ariel had always known what it meant to fight for something, born and raised in the teeming heart of Lagos. Nigeria, she had grown up in a two-room flat where the power cut out often, and the sounds of the city filtered through thin walls. Her mother sold vegetables and fabrics in Balogun Market, haggling daily with relentless energy. Her father, a quiet man with deep eyes and deeper convictions, taught secondary school English and believed in the redemptive power of books. They worked tirelessly, and still the weight of bills, school fees, and rent never seemed to lift. Ariel watched them with equal parts love and hunger, longing not just for more, but for something that felt like control. She chased that hunger across continents. At 17, she earned a scholarship to study in the United States. She graduated top of her class in computer science, then defied every industry prediction by launching her own startup in Silicon Valley. By 30, she had made her first million, and within 5 years, Ariel Tech Solutions became one of the leading AI integration firms in the country. But success came with its own kind of loneliness. Her world had grown bigger, but her circle had grown smaller. Investors, clients, competitors, the media, they all saw her as something carved from glass, sharp, reflective, untouchable. And then came Darren. He'd been hired to redesign the interior of her newly purchased smart home in the hills outside San Francisco. From the moment he stepped into her foyer, with swatches in one hand and confidence in the other, Ariel had felt the pull. He was everything she wasn't. Laid back, effortlessly charming. The son of a wealthy philanthropist mother and an art dealer father. Where she was driven, he was smooth. Where she was cautious, he was bold. They moved fast. Within months, he had become her +1 at fundraisers, her weekend partner on wine country getaways, and soon her husband. But the red flags had been there from the start: dismissive comments, cloaked in humor, long silences followed by flurries of affection, a tendency to disappear emotionally in moments when she most needed grounding. Naomi, her best friend since college, had noticed it, too. "He's beautiful, sure," Naomi had said once with a shrug. "But he's like a designer handbag, looks good on your arm, but empty inside." Ariel had laughed it off. She believed in growth. People could learn. People could love better. 3 years later, the marriage felt like a room slowly filling with gas, no fire yet, but the air was dangerous. Darren had taken over control of their household under the guise of managing the chaos. Staff began reporting directly to him. Groceries arrived without her input. Her favorite tea was replaced with his preferred brand. The house, once her sanctuary, now felt like a showroom she couldn't touch. Darren touched her less too. No soft brushes of fingers in the hallway, no quiet kisses. His affection arrived only when observed at social events, when visitors were present, when optics demanded it. In private, he was kind in the way that felt rehearsed, as if he were checking off a list in his head. She tried to talk to him. He'd listen, nod, say the right things, but every conversation left her feeling smaller, like a signal lost in static. Something was off. The tipping point came last month, late one night, when she heard his voice carrying from the patio. He was on the phone. She wasn't supposed to hear. He was speaking to someone named Eva. The tone was low, urgent, familiar, and it wasn't about design work. It was personal, intimate, calculating. That night, she didn't confront him. She started setting up cameras instead, hidden behind bookshelves, tucked into lamp bases, woven into the corners of her smart home network. She turned her house into her own surveillance grid, and what she saw confirmed everything her instincts had been whispering. Eva was real. The secrecy was deeper than infidelity. There were financial documents, conversations about assets, and late-night meetings when he thought she was asleep. Darren wasn't just cheating, he was planning something. Then came the fall. The stairs, the shattered glass. She remembered the moment clearly, the way the slick marble had seemed to shift beneath her feet. The way Darren had just appeared at the top moments before. The doctors called it an accident, but she hadn't slipped. She'd been pushed. And when she woke up in the hospital, blindfolded by bandages and told she couldn't see, she made a choice. Ariel said nothing. She leaned into the lie like it was strategy. If Darren believed she couldn't see, he'd drop his guard. And he did. The mask slipped almost immediately. In the days since, she'd observed him through her veil of pretend blindness. The way he touched his phone obsessively, made hushed calls in corners, carefully filtered everything he said in front of the nurses, but never asked how she was feeling. Not truly. He didn't suspect a thing. Now, isolated in her own home, surrounded by familiar walls that no longer felt safe, Ariel watched him like a scientist observing a subject. And every hour that passed, the man she married felt more like a stranger who had learned to mimic love just well enough to fool the world. 3 days into her carefully curated blindness, Ariel sat in her living room with dark glasses shielding her watchful eyes. The house, draped in silence and scented faintly with jasmine from a nearby diffuser, felt more like a stage than a home. Every step, every word, every breath she took was rehearsed. She sat motionless, ears finely tuned to the rhythms of a world that now thought she couldn't see. And then came the sound that made her stomach tighten, the front door opening, voices brushing in with the breeze. "She's upstairs." "She doesn't know anything," Darren said, his voice low but relaxed, like someone describing a sleeping pet. His shoes clicked softly against the polished floor as he moved through the entryway. Another voice answered, bright, unbothered, too familiar. "She's not dead, Darren, just blind." Then a laugh, light and cruel, echoing off the walls with a chill that hit Ariel like a slap. Her fists curled slowly into her lap. She knew that voice, knew it better than she wanted to. Eva, her assistant, her mentee. The girl she had once plucked from obscurity at a tech conference, recognizing her sharpness, her hustle, her hunger. Ariel had brought her into the fold, trained her, trusted her. She'd paid for Ava's continuing education, given her access to the executive boardroom, and protected her when the industry tried to swallow her whole. Now Eva was here, standing in her house, speaking about her like she was a liability instead of a person. Ariel's pulse quickened, but her expression didn't shift. She stayed silent, a statue cloaked in pretense, listening. The voices moved further into the house, into the kitchen. Muffled tones, punctuated by the clinking of glasses. They thought she was upstairs. They didn't know she had started spending her afternoons in the living room, tucked into the corner of the velvet sofa where the sun hit just right. They didn't know her ears were now sharper than her eyes. She heard Darren laugh, not the laugh he used in public. This one was smaller, meaner, almost adolescent. "I've already started the transfers," he said. "By the time she notices, the trusts will be empty." "She built all of this," Eva said, her tone laced with amusement. "And now you get to keep it." "She thanked me," Darren replied, pouring himself a drink. Eventually, Ariel's throat went dry. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't a man cheating. This was a slow-motion heist. He was draining her life's work, siphoning off the empire she'd built from nothing, handing parts of it to a woman who used to call her a role model. From then on, Ariel noticed everything. Her favorite necklace, vintage gold chain her mother had given her when she left. Lagos was gone from its usual spot on her dresser. A pair of diamond earrings disappeared next. When she asked the housekeeper about them, she was met with confusion and an apology that felt rehearsed. Later, she heard Darren assuring Eva that he'd handled it. Eva was around more often now, offering to help, brushing past her with an overplayed cheerfulness that made Ariel's skin crawl. "Oh, poor thing," Eva cooed once, resting a hand far too comfortably on Darren's shoulder. "You're doing so much. She's lucky to have you." The implication was cruel in its condescension, and the heat in Darren's silence that followed made Ariel's teeth clench. They flirted within earshot now, daring her to react. Eva giggled at Darren's jokes, lingered too long in the hallway. Once Ariel heard them whispering near the wine cellar. Something about signatures. Something about power of attorney. And all the while, Ariel played her part. She fumbled for her water glass. She pretended to trip over the rug. She nodded with blank eyes when Darren fed her half-truths about meetings, emails, finances. But underneath the mask, her mind was racing, assembling the puzzle pieces. The betrayal wasn't about lust. It wasn't even about love. It was about erasure. Darren wanted her legacy. Eva wanted her place. Together, they were rewriting her story, turning her into a helpless figurehead while they carved up the empire behind her back. What they didn't realize was that Ariel had built her company by watching patterns, tracking the slightest shifts in behavior, and knowing exactly when to strike. Now, she was doing the same just from the shadows of her own home. In the days that followed Ava's arrival, the air in the house thickened. Ariel felt it in her lungs, in the silence that had grown between the walls, in the way Darren no longer bothered with his mask. He still played the doting husband in front of staff, but the veneer had begun to crack in private. He referred to her in the third person now, even when she sat in the room. "She's resting," he'd say on the phone. "She's confused." Sometimes he would wave his hand dismissively when she asked a question, as though she'd lost the right to be taken seriously. Her body was there, her presence unavoidable. But he treated her like furniture, something to be maneuvered around, not consulted. He began making medical decisions without her consent. When her ophthalmologist called to schedule a follow-up, Darren intercepted the conversation and rescheduled it 4 weeks later. He whispered in a sympathetic tone to nurses, suggesting she was showing signs of mood swings, memory lapses, confusion. Each comment was calculated, placed gently into the atmosphere like poison in water. Arielle felt the walls closing in. Every room in the house, once a space she had designed with purpose and control, now felt unfamiliar. Her smart home interface, which she had engineered and customized herself, no longer responded to her voice commands. Her access to personal servers and encrypted files had been revoked. Even her laptop, once her sanctuary, had been mysteriously misplaced during her hospital stay. She was being erased, one boundary at a time. Naomi came by on a Friday afternoon, carrying her usual sharpness with her. She took one look at Ariel and frowned. "You don't look blind," she whispered the moment they were alone. Ariel said nothing at first, only turned her head slightly toward the hallway, making sure Darren wasn't nearby. Then, barely above a breath, she told her the truth. Every piece, the fall, the cameras, the act. Naomi's reaction was instant sharp inhale, then a quiet, seething nod. They formed a plan. Naomi, fierce and loyal, began installing hidden recording devices in the house under the guise of dropping off wellness gifts. She set up secure backups in the cloud, gathered emails, messages, even tailing Eva when necessary. While Ariel pretended to grope for light switches, Naomi was compiling a digital case file that could bring Darren's carefully constructed performance to its knees. But the act was beginning to wear on Ariel. Pretending to be powerless was no longer just strategite was starting to seep into her bones. Darren began gaslighting her in subtle, quiet ways. "Are you sure you asked me that already?" he'd say with furrowed brows. "You've been forgetting things lately. It's okay, rest." He would place pills in her vitamins, he claimed, and watch her drink. Once, she refused, and he smiled too calmly. "I'll get you something else. You're just a little off one night." While lying alone in bed, she began to wonder if he had, in fact, pushed her. She remembered the blur of that moment at the top of the stairs, the strange calm on his face. How quickly he had appeared, how little he said after. Her mind spiraled. She had married a man who could look her in the eye and say "I love you," all while undoing her from the inside out. Maybe Naomi was right all along. Maybe he wasn't just cold. Maybe he was something darker. The next morning, she overheard a call between Eva and a member of Ariel Tech's board. Eva was pitching a transition strategy, speaking as though she were already an executive. That afternoon, Ariel confirmed through Naomi that Eva had been given temporary boardroom access under the pretense of acting on Ariel's behalf. Darren had facilitated it. There were documents, votes, changes in stock, policy moves being made without her knowledge or consent. They were cutting her out of her own legacy, using her silence and supposed blindness as both weapon and shield. Ariel felt herself unraveling. The house felt colder, the shadows longer. She became hyper-aware of every creak in the floorboards, every hushed conversation. Her mind ran constantly, replaying Darren's words, Ava's laugh, Naomi's warnings. She began waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, unable to breathe, as if the very walls were closing in on her body and mind. And then came the night. Everything sharpened into clarity. She was lying on the couch in the den, pretending to be asleep. Darren and Eva were in the next room. She heard the soft hum of their voices, the clinking of whiskey glasses, the rustle of papers. Then Ava's voice, syrupy and impatient, floated toward her. "When will you sign the papers?" A pause. Then Darren's response, low and precise. "Once she's mentally unfit. Blind is just the start." The air left Ariel's lungs. The room spun. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it was trying to escape her body. She wanted to scream, to leap from the couch and throw every truth she knew into their faces, but she didn't move. She stayed frozen, heartbroken and furious, absorbing every word. It wasn't just about the company. It wasn't even about her money. Darren wanted her declared legally incompetent. They were building a narrative, one where Ariel was unstable, delusional, unfit to lead, incapable of protecting her own assets. The truth settled over her like a blade, pressed to the skin. This was no longer just a betrayal. It was a hostile takeover of her life. And now she knew exactly what she was up against. With Naomi's unwavering support, Ariel began orchestrating her long-awaited retaliation with a meticulousness that rivaled the precision she applied to her tech empire. They started by securing a trusted lawyer who specialized in corporate law and elder abuse cases. Someone who understood the subtle dangers of manipulation disguised as care. Hidden cameras were installed in the study and the bedroom, their lenses. Small and silent witnesses to every move Darren and Eva made. Ariel's performance became her new armor. She began speaking aloud to herself in disjointed fragments, repeating nonsensical phrases and wandering the house in a haze. Expression shifted between pity and smug satisfaction as he watched her seemingly unravel. Each stammered word and confused glance was a carefully calculated act, bait designed to convince him she was slipping away mentally, emotionally, irrevocably. Days passed, and Darren grew bolder, less guarded. He started openly discussing the inevitable guardianship, casually showing Eva medical reports that painted Ariel as cognitively impaired, documents doctored and doctored again, forged by professionals on his payroll. His voice carried false sympathy when he finally confronted Ariel in the sunlit study, sliding the guardianship papers across the polished desk. "It's for your own good," he said smoothly, expecting gratitude or at least submission. "You'll be protected, cared for. You won't have to worry about anything anymore." Ariel sat silently, the dark glasses hiding the storm raging behind her calm exterior. Tears welled and spilled down her cheeks, a perfectly timed cascade to sell the facade of weakness and despair. She reached out, trembling ever so slightly, and took the pen. Darren's eyes flickered with triumph. But just as the tip of the pen touched the paper, Ariel lifted her hands with a slow, deliberate grace. Her fingers slid the glasses from her face, and the room caught its breath. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked onto Darren's stunned gaze. "You forgot," she said softly. "I'm not blind. I was just watching you fall." The silence shattered as Darren froze, the color draining from his face. Ava's confident posture crumbled, her voice catching in the air as she stammered, searching for words that wouldn't come. Before either of them could react, the heavy thud of security boots echoed down the hallway. Naomi stepped forward, flanked by the lawyer and a private investigator, their expressions solemn but victorious. The recordings on their devices played quietly but unmistakably. The financial transactions, the whispered conspiracies, the casual betrayals caught in crystal clear footage, every lie unraveled, every plot exposed. Darren's facade was stripped, bare in an instant, and the power shifted irrevocably. Ariel stood tall, no longer the woman trapped behind layers of deception. The empire she had built, the life she had fought for, was still hers, and justice, cold and exacting, was finally coming to light. The courtroom buzzed with attention that had little to do with Ariel's presence. Darren's arrest on charges of fraud, attempted coercion, and assault sent ripples through the tech world and social circles alike. Ava's fall from grace was just as swift, stripped of her position, publicly disgraced, and facing a civil lawsuit that threatened to dismantle her reputation and future. Standing before the judge, Ariel's eyes were clear and unwavering, her voice steady and filled with quiet strength as she spoke words that cut deeper than any legal argument. Sometimes blindness isn't about your eyes, it's about what you refuse to see in someone you love. The weight of that truth hung in the room, a testament to the journey she had endured and the clarity she had reclaimed. Choosing not to return to the mansion that had become a prison of betrayal, Ariel sold it, letting go of the ghosts and the memories tangled within its walls. She redirected her focus and energy into restructuring her company with renewed vision and purpose, launching a groundbreaking initiative dedicated to women's legal empowerment and private mental health services tailored for high-pressure executives. Like herself, there was no rush to fill the void left by Darren, no new relationships to distract from the work of healing. Instead, she embraced the slow, steady process of reclaiming her peace on her own terms, forging a life shaped by resilience, wisdom, and unshakable self-worth. Ariel sat quietly on a weathered park bench, the afternoon sun casting a warm, golden glow across her face. The world moved around her in gentle rhythms. Children's laughter echoed as they chased one another across the grassy field, and couples strolled hand in hand along winding paths. The simplicity of these moments felt almost foreign after everything she'd endured, yet deeply comforting. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. Seeing Naomi's name, she answered without hesitation. "How are you holding up?" Naomi's voice was steady, filled with concern and care. Ariel smiled, a calm that came from deep within settling over her like a bomb. I finally see things for what they are, she said softly, her eyes tracing the light filtering through the leaves above, and who I am, that's never been clearer. There were no tears, no anger, just a quiet, unshakable clarity. She exhaled slowly, letting the breath fill her completely, grounding her in the present. In that stillness, she found peace, not because the past was erased, but because she had reclaimed her story on her own terms. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with soft hues as the world around her continued its steady flow. Ariel breathed in once more, steady and sure, and simply allowed herself to be.